Alright, everybody, you're in for a special treat today. I've been riding this bike, I suppose about a month, but riding it long enough to try to get a good feel for it. Definitely has some power, definitely has some get up. Makes you feel special. This trail is pretty infamous, so a lot of people like to take this trail. It's a great trail just to test out any bike on, really. It does have some twisties. Overall, it's just a beautiful bypass instead of taking the freeway if you live out here in Northwest Arkansas. So I'm not really trying to just crush it, but there we go, officially on the bypass. Mostly just enjoy the view. It's 55 degrees outside right now, but with the wind chill riding, feels more like 40. So like I said before, this is the 2003 Honda CBR 600 F4i. The F4i, I believe, was only made from about 2001 to 2006 is when they upgraded and went for more of the rally style. So they went to like the R version. All the research I've seen on this bike says that this bike is essentially bulletproof. And I said, all right, let's put it to the test. It's basically the last version of the 600 before it became a much more race inspired bike. So this was kind of like the last of the high powered 600 range commuters. In some of the reviews that I went through, they say when you get to about that 7,000 RPM range, it's like you get a second wind, and they're right. I've seen that so far, and it's actually been pretty cool. You don't even think you're there, and then all of a sudden you're just pulling ahead. But we're gonna get to a bypass up here in a little bit. Beautiful. This bike, like I mentioned, it has the dyno, or not the dyno, sorry, the Power Commander 3, stage 3 on it. So it's got a little bit more power, especially when you pull back on the throttle than maybe like a stock bike would have. But it's nice to have, I will say that, especially for an older model bike that maybe can show its years a little bit more than other bikes do. This bike currently has about 35 and change thousand miles on it, so it's definitely getting into that Honda like mid-range. Based on what I understand and what I've seen and just what I've tested so far, Honda seems to have a pretty good reputation for reliability. A little bit more of the bike. Here you go, the 2003. It's kind of got that old school, a little bit more like bubbly version looking on the front. Look at that beautiful view. It does have some damage, a little bit of, where maybe they over tightened some of the bolts on it, but not a bad looking bike. All right, so let's get back on the road. That nice Kaufman exhaust.
So let me clear something up. GoPro really doesn't like me because for whatever reason, when I make these trips and do these videos, I continue to have problems with them just cutting out. I had a full battery and tons of space on this last card, and it cut out right where I was talking about the exhaust. So picking up where we left off, the Kaufman exhaust added as an add-on to this bike. Not original, obviously, but it does give the bike a nice sporty tune, and they're fairly cheap to get as an aftermarket slip-on exhaust. So let's talk about a few things as we kind of close out this video. First is power. Yes, it's got powers. That 600 F4i does have a power commander on it, but I think that it still has enough power that it could hang tight with some of the 600s. Not enough to hang out with the leader boys, but enough that you could have some fun and be able to tool around with those even modern day 600s. Launching is good. Decent overtaking for freeway and just general traffic. On the high end, I mentioned this before, but it really does have like an extra power band right around the 7,000 RPM mark, which is surprisingly, it's just a surprise. It's nice to have, it's nice to feel, and it's kind of just a nice little added benefit when you get to that power range. Low end, it's a little bit more frustrating because it feels like your gear ratio is so low that you're already in 6th gear when you're hitting 50 miles an hour, and if you've run leader bikes or other bikes, you tend to feel like that's a little bit undercut in terms of power. But if you're used to that, great, then no big deal. Handling, I'd say overall handling is decent. Out of 10, I would give it probably a 7. The bike's still a little bit heavy, and in some of these tighter corners you can feel a little bit of that weight. It's not as heavy as though like a leader bike would be, so it has a little bit one up on the leader bike game there, but it's still heavy enough that you're a little uncertain about the corners until you get really confident with the bike. And that might just be me as the rider not being able to be that confident, but still a decent bike. But it does have good braking power. I never had any issues with that. There's a little bit more of a front forced brake occasionally when doing this, especially if you come up on a corner you weren't prepared for. Obviously full on the back and a little bit on the rear. Overall, not bad with that. Comfort, I'd say comfort overall is probably out of 9 for a bike that is still kind of more geared towards sport than anything else. Most of the reviews you'll read today say this is an overall all-around bike, so to speak, and I'd say that they're pretty accurate with that. This bike gives you kind of the luxury of being able to tuck if you wanted to. At the same time, you scoot your butt forward and you can straighten up your elbows and rest your back a little bit from that crouch position, and you can alternate as you ride, which gives you a little bit more luxury than maybe a bike that's mostly just tuck and speed through these corners. So I appreciated that. Not bad though. Right now you might be able to find some of these in this type of condition for about $4,000, maybe a little bit less depending on mileage and a few other factors, but it's not bad in terms of pricing, and if you're able to find one, I would say go ahead and grab it. But overall, I'd say that the pricing is going to be fairly low for this, but once again, this was one of the last versions of this kind of all-around commuter sport bike in the 600 range for Honda. Ultimately, I would recommend this bike. They say it's bulletproof. I don't think that it is, but it's still a fun bike to ride, and you can see that I'm actually having a blast out here on the pig trail. Overall, everyone, that's my review of the 2003 Honda 600 F4i. Good bike, but we got to move on to the next one. So, peace, everyone.